So, Luna has a nightmare, or lack thereof. Alright, not much of an intro, but my first impressions on this episode were probably just, oh, Luna has a nightmare, how interesting. I was almost wondering whether or not that implied that usually she doesn't have nightmares, and, the goddess of sleep having a nightmare is incredibly strange. Turns out it was actually the opposite. And when I watched the first scene, it was interesting, because I was really confused in the beginning, but as soon as Luna woke up from her nightmare turned good, and she says, what? My dream ended happily? That cannot happen. I was thinking, really? Honestly, the first thing that I thought that implied was that maybe Luna was bearing the burden of everybody else's nightmares or something like that. Like, ponies can have nightmares, but maybe the worst of them were taken by her. Maybe the worst nightmares, or, a good amount of it, was like she was bearing the burden of everybody's, bad dreams or something like that. And if she has a good dream, then that must mean that, I don't know, something like that. And I thought, wow, that is really deep for a kid's show, and I was really kind of excited. But it turns out that wasn't what it was. Still, I actually sat through the entire opening pondering this theory. And that Tantabus thing in the beginning, that was really strange, and I was actually pretty confused. And the thing is, aside from her saying, do your worst, we never really got foreshadowing for the explanation later. Instead, I was kind of left wondering what the heck was going on, and wondering whether or not there would even be an explanation later as to what that thing was, and it just took forever for it to actually happen. I'll be honest, it might just be me, so I'm not gonna worry about this. Anyway, so besides my first impressions, let's just get to the plot. Honestly, the plot was good. It had potential. It had a lot of potential. Knowing that Luna was the center of the episode was really interesting, considering everyone really likes her as a princess. And, her getting screen time is great. And more development. Development is always good. But the plot itself, it had a lot of potential. But unfortunately, I kind of feel like it could have been done better, and some of that potential was sort of wasted. It's not that it was a bad episode, it just wasn't the best episode either. I feel like it had the potential to be one of those episodes that I look back on and say, yeah, this is a classic, this is a good one. An oldie but a goodie, later on. But unfortunately, I don't think I'll be able to do that now. I mean, except for possibly looking back at the ending scene, where, Luna was all guilty and stuff. And once again, being generous with the tears, I do like that. Anyway, we have the characters. They're our favorites. I feel like they weren't used as well as they could have been, though. I feel like it was primarily Rainbow Dash and Pinkie Pie. Pinkie, who didn't really have very many genuine reactions, she was primarily comedy, and Rainbow Dash, who was just teased for being her tough self, like with that whole cute dream being a nightmare. And so it didn't feel like the characters themselves had as much spirit to them as sometimes it usually may. Here, let me try to put this in a different way. And I kind of had to script this part. Alright, so basically, in little kids' shows, characters only say what really needs to be said, like maybe there's a problem in Strawberry Shortcake, and I'm making this up as I go along, and the characters will say, what a nice sunny day, I can't believe Blueberry's birthday is tomorrow, to set the setting. And then the next character will say, birthday? Oh no, I completely forgot, to set the problem. And everything said throughout the episode is very in your face, nothing to read into, and nothing is said just for the sake of being said. It's either a bit of comedy or it relates directly to the problem. The characters react within their realms of being who they are. For example, a loud one will have louder lines and a tough one will have more tomboyish lines. But aside from that, usually in shows like Strawberry Shortcake, for example, there really isn't much beyond that. My Little Pony has proven that it can do more than that, with sprinkling character development and personality traits into these problem-solving situations, just as people would do in real life, or just as people do in really good shows or movies. It feels more natural that way. For example, that situation from earlier, what a nice sunny day, and the party, and oh, I forgot, and everything. In My Little Pony, that situation might sound more like, Pinkie Pie saying, isn't it exciting? The weather team decided to move tomorrow's scheduled rain to the next day instead. We're so lucky. And then, getting excited and stuff. And having maybe AJ say, well, yeah, I suppose that is a little lucky, considering I gotta finish harvesting tomorrow, but I don't know about exciting. And then Pinkie would reply, what are you talking about? How is it not exciting? This would mean that it wouldn't rain on Fluttershy's birthday, and we can have her party outside just like she'd want it. It's too perfect. And then, Applejack would be all, birthday? Birthday? Tomorrow? You mean like, when we all wake up in the morning tomorrow? And Pinkie Pie would be all, yeah, don't tell me you forgot. And then, it all go on from there. This episode, though, had more of the former example. Pinkie Pie was used for comedy, RD partly used for comedy, and the rest of the characters primarily just said what they had to say to move the plot along while still abiding by their personalities. Granted, the pet grooming thing in the beginning was a little more alright, and the plot didn't allow much more wiggle room in the way of more natural-sounding conversations beyond that. But nonetheless, I could feel it throughout the episode that they were primarily only saying what needed to be said, and there wasn't much individual personality to any of it aside from their primary label. RD is a tomboy, AJ is sensible, Pinkie is comedy, Twilight is smart, Rarity is fancy, Fluttershy is sensitive. Now, has this happened before? Yeah, of course. It happens. I'm not writing off the episode as bad because of it, I'm only pointing this out. But while we're on the subject of characters, there is Luna. Even though she suffered a minor amount of what I was just talking about, she still had better character development, and we got more personality from her, and that ending was great. She felt so guilty about being Nightmare Moon. I had never even considered the fact that it could be eating away at her like this. And if I ever did consider the fact, it would be more like saying, oh, well, they'd never bring it up. I mean, it's Hasbro. Why would they get deep into her guilt like that? Usually stuff like that isn't covered. I mean, this isn't Lullaby for a Princess or anything. Us fans are the only ones that dig that deep. But I was so wrong, and I'm glad that I was so wrong. That part with Luna, even though I feel like it was resolved a little bit too easily, at the same time, oh my gosh, that was just great. I was impressed a little bit, Great ending, really. It was a great ending. Not only did we get an actual explanation for that weird dark cloud parasite thing, but we got to really hear just how strongly Luna felt about regretting everything as Nightmare Moon. That was absolutely fantastic for Luna. I'd say that she needed an episode like that. Really, she did. And I'm proud of the writers for just that one part, even. I think the rest of the episode could have been improved, but this was good. Just a few afterthoughts. So I know that since the comics, people have been liking the Luna and Spike interaction and everything, so I think that's pretty nice. Also, best Spike face. And the nightmares, honestly, they really could have been more creative. I noticed this trend that it sort of turned everything into monsters, and it would have been nice if they had done something different for each pony. Like that episode of Powerpuff Girls. Yes, I am comparing to the Powerpuff Girls. Not because of Lauren Faust, just because it just happened to be what I was thinking of while watching it. But there was an episode where him got into their dreams and decided to turn everything into nightmares. When that happened, he didn't just randomly turn things into monsters, he made things genuinely creepy per Powerpuff Girl. I don't remember what happened with Buttercup, but I know that with Bubbles, all of her stuffed animals that she loved ended up getting really creepy and freaking her out, and all of a sudden, turned into things that she just did not want to, basically turn them into monsters, just like the Cloud did. But with Blossom, it was her in class not being able to answer questions, failing some kind of test and all, and everyone looking at her and, scolding her or whatever was going on, I mean, a little bit of monster stuff happened later, but her nightmare wasn't based on monsters. Her nightmare had to do with the fact that not only was she getting things wrong on the tests, or the questions or whatever, but she had all eyes on her, and she was being judged for it and everything, and it was actually really deep. In fact, that entire episode was kind of creepy. But I'm just saying, there are more creative things you can do with nightmares rather than just, this needs to be a monster, this needs to be a monster, this needs to be a monster. I mean, they were creative with the good aspects of their dreams. Rainbow Dash was beating up changelings, Twilight was reading, Fluttershy was being groomed by Angel, Pinkie Pie was hopping through different thoughts constantly because she's so hyper. All of it was pretty original, but when it came to turning it into a nightmare, all they did was say, yeah, we're just gonna throw a monster in here. And in that, while I can say that it was all caused by the same thing, and thus it almost makes it seem more streamlined that way, at the same time, I think it would have been great if they had been more creative. I mean, and it would have given more character development too. What their fears are. I mean, besides AJ, who just had her stuff rotting, that was at least something. But I mean, Twilight could have had the whole failing a test thing. Fluttershy's monster thing was alright, because I can imagine Fluttershy being really afraid of monsters and everything. Pinkie Pie's could have been her living on the rock farm again, maybe, or I don't know, something like that. Anyway, I'm sure that if I sat here long enough, I'd be able to think of pretty interesting things that they could have been having nightmares about. So that's another bit of wasted potential, in my opinion. Anyway, another afterthought, Power Ponies. Interesting usage, not a bad callback. And Flutterbat. I think I remember hearing that there would be some kind of return of Flutterbat. Considering that there was a fang at the end of that Bats episode, I was really hoping it would be something to make sense of it all. But if this is really all the return was, then I can't say I'm not disappointed. And Derpy, cute, always welcome in my book. And Big Mac. He's fun. I mean, he seems like the kind of character that might be feminine and childish inside secretly. Like, maybe he'd be a brony if he was in our world. Anyway, these developments, I know that they're kind of teasing him, but they actually kind of make me like him more and more. They develop him more as a character. I mean, in comedic ways, but nonetheless they do. He seems like the kind of guy that might have feminine interests that he keeps hidden due to embarrassment. You know, like how some guys are good at sewing or baking but are too embarrassed to tell anyone. You know, that sort of thing. And one last thing. The background ponies, I've noticed, feel more alive now. Amending Fences may have taken place in Canterlot, and Slice of Life may have left a couple things to be desired in terms of writing. But what's funny is that now that I look at all these background characters, I see Minuet, we see Dr. Hooves, and everything else. Suddenly, it's like now we know more about who these characters are, and it gives us the potential that all the other characters that haven't been developed still could be. Rather than just seeing them as ponies to fill space, I think this season has helped us look at background ponies differently. I mean, sure, we always look at background ponies and recognize them. I mean, we're bronies, for goodness sakes, and if we're involved in the fandom, I mean, there are background pony references everywhere. But never as far as show standards have gone. It's always been headcanon. Now we actually have things to base off of, and for some reason it makes me feel like we sort of know these characters better, and we can see them and care for them as the citizens of Ponyville rather than space fillers. Anyway, just something that I noticed. Anyway, I only watched this episode once, so if I missed anything, I do apologize. But I don't have much else to say, so hope you all enjoyed the episode as usual. Comment, like, dislike, etc. And one last thing, apparently there's going to be this huge hiatus until the rest of Season 5, so that's bound to be interesting. I don't know what we'll do in the meantime, but hey, we'll do our best. Anyway, so if my calculations are correct, good luck with the hiatus.